Well, good morning, everyone. I am very pleased to be partnering with the UNC system today to highlight our conversations about how we serve adult learners better. And I'm honored to be on the stage with our guests here who are going to share some perspective. And so let's just start. We have Hadassah Scheffer, I'll get it right eventually, and Dr. Marie Cheney. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about your background just so that our audience can understand your perspective as we talk about our questions today. So we'll start with you, Hadassah.
Thank you. So about 15 years ago, a group of people in Philadelphia who came from economic development, higher ed, and workforce, we looked around and we realized that there were more people in Philadelphia who had started college but didn't finish a degree than there are people who had finished a degree. And for Philadelphia, this was quite startling. Philadelphia has over 100 institutions of higher ed. We import about 300,000 people to our colleges and universities every year. And so we stopped to think about what actually Philadelphia was doing in higher ed. We had two major strategies at the time. One was grow your own, and I don't know if any of you have followed Philadelphia's K-12 system and outcomes, but the grow your own is not really working well for our 100 institutions of higher ed. We had a capture talent that is come from away talent with Campus Philly, and that is showing promise. But my colleagues and I decided that we realized that no one was looking at the people who had started but stopped out. So this goes back to 15 years ago, and we thought that we needed to reframe the conversation. It's not about people who dropped out. It's about people who are poised to make a comeback. So we coined the term comebackers for the potential to make a comeback, not just in education, but in other aspects. You know, as you make a comeback to education, you can improve your income, you can raise your community around you. And so that's what we did in Philadelphia. And after a couple of years of doing that, we started hearing from other communities across the country, mayors in particular, who wanted to adapt what we were doing. And so that's how the Graduate Network started. We are right now a network of 41 communities, including 7 or 8 states. I think North Carolina joined recently, that are working at the ground level, grassroots, with individuals who want to come back, finish a degree, and as a community-based approach, we are also making sure that all the stakeholders are at the table. That includes higher eds, it includes workforce development, it includes all the talent agencies, it includes mayors, in some cases, as in Tennessee, it includes governors. And so we're seeing this change in the conversation. We're not talking about workforce development, we're talking about talent. These are people who have talent skills that they can offer. We also don't like the us versus them narrative. This is us. If you're not learning something new, if you're not part of the new learning economy, you are not going to succeed. You're not going to survive on a personal level, on an institutional level, and as a company. And then, you know, underlying all of this, since our inception, we have also understood that this is really a racial and equity issue. A couple of the people earlier today noted that in passing, but I want to put it very forefront. With the Graduate Network, we're serving about 80,000 people. 70% of them are people of color. 100% of them make earnings that top out at about $50,000 for a family. Half of them make less than $24,000. Imagine having to go back to college and paying for college while bringing that amount of money home to sustain your family. We're asking a lot. These comebackers are ready and willing. We don't think of them as low-hanging fruit or high-hanging fruit. we don't think of this issue as an us versus them. This is all of us together.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hadassah. So I am thrilled to be on this panel, and part of it is because Hadassah is just such a wonderful colleague, and you hearing the deep passion that she has, so much so that she lives in Philadelphia, and I've just moved there so I could be in her aura. No, I just happened to move to Philadelphia, and it's great because I hope we can spend more time together. But hi, I'm Marie Cheney. I'm the president of CALE, which stands for the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning. And I've spent my career in adult post-secondary institutions trying to change institutions from the inside to better serve adult learners. And for a long time, honestly, nobody cared, except the adults and those of us who cared about the adults. And, but now everybody cares. And so it's kind of great to be here, right? It's like, okay, now people know adults are important. CALE has been around for a very long time, and yes, we were the group that really came up with this idea of prior learning assessment, which is now more and more really being called recognition of prior learning. And you know, across the country, and Lumina has adopted that term too. The idea being that adults do not come with an empty brain, they come with a lot of college level knowledge that they've gotten from informal as well as formal prior experiences. But when you think about CALE, I want you to, I've been the president now for about a year and a half. We're about change. We're an intermediary. Hadassah raises a lot of money and does a lot of work for adults directly. We don't work directly with adults, but we're the intermediary that works with colleges, universities, employers, workforce entities, everybody who's trying to solve these problems and come together across sectors. And so, you know, we're, like I said, we're about change and helping institutions think through their changes and how to work across the sectors to create better systems to serve adult learners. Look, having been in higher ed, I know that adults are often viewed as the low-hanging fruit, or the, we're running out of 18-year-olds, so let's pivot to adults. And I actually have to be honest with you, I think that's really dangerous, because we run the risk of making them a commodity. They're just another group of students if we could just get them in here. And we're really missing what is really important, which is this incredible shift in how our society is going to be working, our economy. The changes coming are of an immensity that we really can't fathom. But when you talk to people who really study sort of where the changes are coming, what you find out is, look, our job isn't just to front load education, you know, and that's like give you your 4 years and now you're good to go. Our job is to think about this coming world where kids today, who were born today or even recently, Evie, our speaker who was talking about Evie, this is important for Evie, they will go through 2 to 3 major paradigm shifts in the world. Paradigm shift is something that just fundamentally changes everything that we know and do. So the internet was probably the big paradigm shift of our generation, of our time. Think about going through 3 of those in your career. You will have to continuously learn. We're talking now about 60-year curricula. And that's what we have to be thinking about. I actually think it's exciting. It's daunting, it's challenging, it's frightening, but it's also exciting because finally, those of us who care about learning, it's not just get it over with, check the box. Sometimes I feel like we treat education the way we do going to the doctor, right? You gotta go get your degree, have some fun, but then you don't ever have to go back. We have to think of it like exercise and eating well. It's like we just have to do it every day for the rest of our lives, and it should be pleasurable. So that's the stance that I come from. We need adults. Adults are everywhere. If you want to know where they are, take a Lyft, take an Uber, go to the store. I'm an adult. We're all adults. Solve the problems for all of us.
Thank you. So as you can see, we have a great panel, and so I'm excited to hear your perspective on some of the questions we have today, so I'm going to jump right into it. What are you seeing around the country that states are doing well with regards to aligning higher education and workforce needs?
So as Marie alluded, we're seeing everyone jump on this bandwagon because traditional age students are scarce. I think that every student now needs to be treated the same way that we look at adult students. Even 18-year-olds have complex needs. They don't want to sit in a classroom for hours. They don't want to go by semesters. A lot of them need to be out in the workforce. So I see these changes covering everyone. Tennessee, as a state, is doing fabulous work. Everyone's heard about Tennessee Navigate Reconnect, supported by the governor, supported by their lottery system. All states wish, or a lot of us practitioners wish, that we had the foresight that the governor of Tennessee did when he created Tennessee Reconnect and now Reconnect Navigate. But other states are, I think, waking up. We here in North Carolina, you have projects at several of your institutions. I think what is needed is a realization that you're going to have to look at costs, at when and where and how credentials are offered, at what these credentials are. Because if you don't, it's not that these students are going to pause and wait for you. They're going elsewhere. They're going to the for-profit or not-for-profit national higher eds like SNU, like WGU, that are waiting for them with open arms 24 hours a day. You want to start your degree now at 2 a.m. because you woke up with a panic attack that everyone is moving forward and you're not. Those are the types of institutions that are really adult ready. And their credentials are increasingly being recognized by employers. So while I see a lot of movement around North Carolina, I think you need to really think very big and very bravely about how you're going to serve the people in North Carolina who do want to go back to college. When we survey people, they want to continue their education. There's no if about that. People understand that they need more education. They're not quite sure if they need a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree or any kind of degree, but they are hungry for more education. So I think that is, that realization, where it's resounding in North Carolina, is where your pockets of advancement should focus on.
Yeah, excellent point. So I would have picked Tennessee as well. I always talk about, when other states ask me, I talk about North Carolina. I think wherever you see a lot of energy and groups coming together, that's a really good sign. Ohio is doing some really good work. It usually starts with a governor or a legislature that really says, you know, we have got to boost our completion rates, and they connect workforce entities, chambers of commerce, employers with the education system. And there's funding. You can't do this for free. So, you know, states that are looking at this as a strategic imperative. Pennsylvania is doing some very interesting things, partially because their state system is in a lot of trouble, and they need to pivot, and they need to serve their, particularly adults, far better than the 18-year-olds that it was built for. Those are some, I would say those are some of the sort of shining states, but it's really strategy, and it's connecting across at the highest levels, and money.
Great, thank you. So my next question is really about North Carolina specifically. What are you seeing in North Carolina? I think you've both touched on it a little bit, but anything else that you want to add that you're seeing specifically in North Carolina aligning higher ed and the workforce? You want to start, Dr. Sini?
Well, first I want to give a shout out. You have Dr. Alston, you are here in the audience. She is the graduate coordinator for the only HBCU school in the country that has a graduate degree in adult education. That is a treasure. You should treasure that. It's great. You might not even know it. There used to be 4 at HBCUs across the country. 3 have closed. the more you can support all of the types of research and education that you need around adult learners, definitely do it. I think what I'm seeing is I know in the Triad region, and it's more of what I was talking about, in the Triad region, Cale has actually done some work with workforce development there to help them think through this healthy talent ecosystem, because it is talent. It's about talent, and there's a lot of talent in this state. And they're connecting with community colleges, and that's really important. And there's work being done at the community college level, and the types of just cross connections are good to see, and there's a level of energy and a combined, like there's just a lot of on the ground work where you're having these conversations. I spend a lot of time in North Carolina because some of my, you know how you have family you really like better than the rest of your family? Well, mine happen to live in North Carolina, so I'm in the Winston-Salem area all the time, and so I'm really watching this. That one of my nephews graduated from NCSSM, the high school for kids who are really good at STEM, and another graduated from Appalachian State. You have a wonderful system here, but working across and thinking about those who have not yet been reached. And you've got some funders here who are really focused on those folks. So keeping up the conversation is really the important thing.
Yeah, so I was struck by a campaign, I think, at North Carolina A&T that says, "We want you back." I think that sends a really powerful message to the comebackers that they're wanted, not just for the extra tuition dollars that they might bring in at a time where institutions are looking for money, but that there's really an openness. I think at East Carolina University, if I'm not mistaken, there are online degree completion programs that are very worker-friendly. So those are two of the many, many examples across North Carolina that I can think of.
Thank you. So I think throughout the morning we've talked a lot about these adult learners and the need to bring them back into our education systems, but as we're passionate, and I love your statement, bravely and boldly, as we're going out to bring these individuals into our institutions or back to education, where do we find them and how do we convince them to come back?
So we are a front runner for many universities across the country. The communities of the graduate network, some of our work is to encourage people to come back, and then we follow them to and through all the way to whatever degree or credential that they're pursuing. And let me tell you, we have some people who started who did not have an associate's degree who are now completing up PhD programs. So once anyone, I guess, gets a taste of what education can do and how to navigate it, there's no stopping them. But the primary way we reach out because you all, institutions, have deep pockets for advertising. And it works. Some of it works better. Some of it could use, some polishing. But what we do is we spread the word at the grassroots. We work in communities, and we've found that of the 80,000 people that the network is serving, word of mouth works really well. If a neighbor or family member or a colleague at work or a supervisor says, "I went back to college and I know that it's hard and there are places where you can get that support even before you enroll." This is at the point of making the decision, at the point of waking up and thinking, yes, higher education is for me, I need to go back and finish. There needs to be somewhere there. So that's where we invest in navigators, in ambassadors, in advisors. They're called all kinds of different things. The main thing is that they are people who are embedded in the community. They look like everyone else in the community. They feel the community, they know the community, they live in the community, they move with the community, and they're there to say, higher education is for you, and here's how to come back. So we've been very, very successful using that to complement what higher eds are doing.
So one of the things I'm going to say, and I think the power of language is really important. Education is not a place. We do not necessarily need to come back to it. People are learning their entire lives. What we're saying is they're going to come back to these buildings and these edifices that we've built, right, where we have our offices and our classrooms, but that's not really education. That's where it tends to happen right now. For adult learners, we talk about our personal stories. My father was an Italian immigrant. He never got past 4th grade. One of the smartest men I ever knew, but not educated like I was lucky enough to be able to get a PhD. It's as though, and I think about my dad, because it's always good to have one target in your head. It's as though there were, even your folks, Hadassah, who might be in the community, like my dad was a member of all sorts of, organizations, and he volunteered, and it would be like if somebody said to him, hey, there's this really expensive hotel, and I know it's really hard to get to, and you don't know what's in there, but I'm telling you, it's good for you, so we're going to take you up there. It's expensive, but really, trust me. We have to stop that. My dad would have made fun of it. He would not have gone to college. He certainly could have gone to college in terms of being able to do it. We have to have models of education that go to people in the community. One of the things I do is I just always ask people their story. Ask the Lyft driver, ask the Uber driver. I have a dog that I walk all the time, and you get to know other people through your dogs, right? So while our dogs are off playing, I always go, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? Everybody's in transition, it seems. These are, everybody's like, well, I was in catering, and then I did this, and right now I'm unemployed. People don't have the navigation. They don't know how to get there. Just because you have beautiful campuses, and you have great campuses here, there's no easy way to navigate that. And also, where was the I just think to yourself, where was the last place you learned something? Think about that, whatever you had to learn. I'm going to bet most of you learned it on Google, Wikipedia, YouTube, a MOOC, a seminar. We've got to be thinking about new models of education, unbundling, helping people to learn on the job at the college level that we can then mesh into college programs. I am not saying that these are, I hear people say narrow vocational skills. I'm not at all saying that's what we should make education to become, but there's a lot of learning that can be done when you think about work and your life as a part of education and where education happens, not just in the buildings like these wonderful buildings that we're in. So that's what I would say. They're everywhere. Adults just need to know, like, what's the pathway? How do I start, and why should I start, and how do I pay for it?
Great. Thank you so much. So we've talked a lot about how adults, and I feel a little bit funny talking about adults as if there's some group that I don't identify with, but apparently I'm out of the young adult stage now, just for a few years. But as we think about adults and our younger students, how do adults think about workforce outcomes differently? And so as we're talking about those workforce outcomes, how do we talk to adults in a way that connects with them?
First of all, let me, I'm going to bring out some numbers. So first of all, when we looked at the people we served and who actually re-enrolled, we found that the sweet spot, the bump, was at age 46. And we think that when we talked to people, they said, time was running out. I knew that going back to college and getting my degree would take me 6 to 10 years. And they're not wrong. We talked earlier about how long people think it will take them to finish a degree, and our expectation that it's going to take them 1 or 2 years. When we looked at the numbers, it takes far longer than that. And as institutions and as people who support adults going back to school, we need to be prepared for that and respect that. We have data on the patterns, on how people are going back and stopping again and coming back. And so when we think about this trajectory and how it connects to workforce outcomes, we started asking people who are in the workforce employers and their employees about why they were pursuing higher education and what they thought the outcomes would be across all ages. We wondered if employers recognized the education benefits offered by employers, and they said yes. Surprisingly, almost everyone said yes, and then we asked what they were doing about that, and very few said that they had programs in place to support employees. But then we asked employees, we asked adults, what do you think your workforce outcome is going to be if you complete a degree? And most people said they didn't know, because there was no clear signaling from their employer about what would happen if they were to complete a degree. We found huge discrepancies between what employers thought they were doing for employees and what employees saw that their employers were doing for them. So 55% of employers, and we surveyed 30,000 employers, and these are small to medium-sized employers. These are not like the big Googles and Walmarts. These are the employers that make up 90% of the employer market in the United States. And they said 55% of employers said that they offer supports, but only 40% of employees that we served said that they knew anything about these supports, and less took advantage of them for different reasons. So it means to us that there's a big disconnect between workforce and employers, what they think they're offering, what they want, and what the students themselves are hearing. And then you add into that higher ed, and how higher ed institutions now are struggling to understand what employers want as well, and how to align. And I think there's room for a lot of very frank conversations amongst those three groups: employers, students themselves, the working students, and the higher eds.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question, because I think we talk about it in these almost as though they're so different. You know, what traditional age students want versus what adult students want. But really, if you think about it, and you ask most 18, 19-year-olds going to college, particularly today. I know in the maybe 70s when I was in college, we wanted to learn and sort of experience and just get the degree, because then we could figure out. Well, now the students are quite driven, and I'm watching my nephews with this, and they know what they want, the internship they have to get, right? So they're all about getting a good job when they get out. And so we used to say that's what adults were interested in. Well, they are, but you know, I used to be the provost at University of Maryland Global Campus, now it's called. It used to be UMUC. And those adults, you know, they were college of hard knocks. Many of them were, you know, maybe early to mid-career, and they saw what happens when you don't have a degree. And some of them were getting a degree simply to keep their job. They were afraid they'd lose their job if they didn't have it. Some were trying to move up in their career. And some were trying to switch careers. And so I think it's a different set of, they're not wide-eyed anymore. Like, this is the real thing, which is why they're so serious. But a thing we forget is adults also have a sense of wanting to feel capable and competent and accomplished. And when we would have graduations, that was our favorite day of the year, as it is probably for all of you at your campuses, because all the hard work and struggle and pain and committee meetings, here are these happy students, right? And I can't tell you, you know, how many would come across the stage. Some had their little kids with them. Some would be like, "Thank you, Mom. I did it for you, Mom." I mean, so many stories of they told a parent they were going to do it. It is a sense of like they are now someone, and they've carried around this. I mean, in our society, we have made it almost a stigma not to have a degree, which is, I think, a shame. We maybe have gone too far in that direction. But once they get the degree, it just is like this whole, like, I can do it, and then they move on. So it is workforce, but it's really fundamentally about identity for many people, too.
Thank you. So as we think about serving this population and getting them back into education and thinking about workforce, the way that they view the workforce, what are some of the challenges that you think our adult students are facing as they come back into the education space?
We'll flip it up here. We'll make it different. Well, when they come back into education or the job after they've graduated, I just want to make sure.
Well, I think probably both would be interesting for us to think about. I think the question, let's start with the education, and then how that education perhaps is helping them address some of the challenges as they go into the workforce.
Yeah. So I bet if I had a conversation with each of you separately and said, are you doing what you've always really wanted to do? Is this like really it? Even those of us who have a PhD and has had a great career and still have a great career, there's so many people who are like, yeah, I don't know, I kind of fell into this. Even if you are a faculty member, an administrator, it just happened, here's how this happened. And our adult students are not that different. So they come into college hoping, I think, to have the pathway laid out before them, right? Because that's kind of what we promise. Come to college and like it'll all work for you. But many people are struggling just with what's this going to get me, which is why sometimes taking the gen ed courses and the early courses is really a struggle, because they don't see the relevance. And I'm not saying that there isn't relevance, there certainly is, but it's hard. Also, if you think about if you're 18, you've been through a school system where, you're used to it. You're used to a faculty member telling you what to do and read this and take the notes. But as an adult, you have some sense of your own life, and so you're an expert in some area. You have a family, whatever. You come back to school, and it's really easy to feel stupid, and like it's not for you. And one of the things we don't uncover enough, but I am talking with our, Strata does this really interesting work with consumer insights, calling, just the general population and asking them about their experience in education through the years, and they're just finding some really interesting, with all these data points. One of the things I've asked them to dig into is it's too easy to say, well, I dropped out because I'm busy, or I dropped out because my kids got sick. My experience and some research that we did when I was at UMGC is that it really comes down to two factors. One is I only have so many hours in the day to be frustrated, and by the third frustration, I don't need this. Like, I don't need to be in a world where they're not answering my calls or giving me straight answers. And then there's this sense of, I don't know where I'm going. I haven't really learned to be a good student. I feel kind of, even if I got an A, I don't know how I got the A. It's just, I'm not feeling like I don't get where I'm heading or what the jobs might be. And so we don't give this sort of accelerated pathway. That's why I was so happy to see, we shouldn't give adults this idea that they can take 9, 10, 15 years to finish. Instead, we need to design models that help them accelerate and get this done in the life that they're in right now. So we have to be thinking more about them. And then the same thing goes with careers. If you haven't, if you're not, and here we're talking about socioeconomic status, if you don't have parents who can connect you, get you the right internship, introduce you to people, if you haven't gone to the schools that, help you do that, it's another world that is just very strange, and you don't know what the rules are. And this is kind of a bigger issue as well. Like, it is not the case that if you just go get a good degree or a good certificate, whatever that means, that then you're going to be on your way. There's all of these other informal ways that we have to navigate, and I think that's why I'm a big fan of career readiness from day one in any kind of a degree, including connections to mentors, professional associations. Get people out there connected to what they want to do.
So let's think a little bit for just a minute. If you had a magic wand, we'd all love to have one of those. What would be one thing that you would change about how our post-secondary system serves adults?
I would say stop thinking about serving adults as separate from serving younger students. Treat everyone as an adult and adjust the entire system to serve people who have lives and need to get ahead by getting more education.
Wow, ditto. we completely agree.
Nice. Thank you.
High five.
So I like that. So what's the easiest thing? So if we leave here today and we think, okay, this is a big issue, it's hard to tackle, what's one thing that maybe we can walk out today and might be the easiest place for us to start? Any advice?
Yeah, so if you're in an educational institution, start the conversation if you haven't. Find your provost or assistant provost or get to your president and say, what are we doing about adults? Not just because we need more students, but there's a lot of adults who need us. And look, I'm also pragmatic, and I know that schools are worrying. Colleges and universities are quite worried about the enrollment cliff. So even if you have to start there, like, hey, you worried about the enrollment cliff? Go to adults. But that's like, I think probably it is a lever. It's one of the motivators, but if that just gets you in the door to the conversation, fine. But then there's a lot of work that you have to do. So then get someone to put it in a strategic plan, appoint a committee. You know how things work in your campus, and you've got a lot of resources now in North Carolina that you can draw from. I'll be shameless. CALE's a membership organization. Institutionally, we'd love to have you as in our network. North Carolina System did just join, and we're thrilled to have them and would love to see more of you. So just start the conversation and then start making some action toward change.
I think now that there are more and more institutions across the country that are realizing that they have to be more adult-friendly, it's getting easier to adapt and adopt what others have tried. So Fresh Start programs, where you can clear the SAP burden, the satisfactory academic progress burden from students, and say, when you come back, we'll start tracking your GPA afresh, so it doesn't hamper your financial aid. I think that is a relatively easy step. Loan forgiveness, we've seen Wayne State with Warrior Way Back, and increasingly other institutions forgive outstanding debt. In some cases, these institutions now don't roll the debt up to collectors or to the state or to the federal government. They hold the debt for longer so that students have, and the institutions themselves have a chance to work it out. So Warrior Way Back in Detroit allows students to come back and clear off debt up to, I think, $1,500, which is a little bit above the average debt that most of the adults actually carry, semester by semester. So every semester, if you earn some sort of GPA, I don't know if it's 2, 2.0, 2.5, $500 of your debt is wiped off. And so you can earn your way back to good standing that way. And then I think training for faculty who are not familiar with adults. I heard earlier that there are not many faculty here who haven't taught adults, but allowing for flexibility that adults and all students need. When I taught at Temple University, I taught adults, and we had exams, and wouldn't you know it, there were always emergencies before the finals. And I went to the department chair and I said, look, one woman got sick, another one had her baby early. They couldn't make it to the final. I'm going to give them an extension, and it's going to be in my time, and I'll get the grades in when the grades need to be in, but I'm going to work with them. And the department chair said, why would you do that? I said, because I've been working with them for a semester, 2 semesters, a year. Their lives are complicated, and they need this time because they've done the work. And that brings me to the fourth thing is, and I know Marie didn't want to talk about credit for prior learning, but recognizing that prior learning has happened, and it happens everywhere. And so easing up a little bit on the processes to recognize that prior learning. Currently, a lot of prior learning happens in retrospect, after students have been at an institution. And there are a lot of hoops. You have to take tests, which might be the easiest way. Sometimes it can take you a year to prove that you know what you know. So I really encourage all the institutions here to look at what CALE is doing. And it's just a small part of what CALE is doing, but now since you're members of CALE, you should dig deep into all the resources that CALE brings to look at what your institutions can do to be more adult-friendly, because CALE has paved the way. They have shown how it's done. All you have to do is adapt it to yourselves.
The check's in the mail, Hadassah. Thank you.
So I've asked a lot of questions, and before we open it up to the audience, is there any final thoughts that we didn't cover or that you think are particularly important for us to talk about today?
I really want to underscore the racial bias that exists in higher ed and how much harder it is for people of color, for low-income people, for people who are not the norm in many ways to proceed through higher education. I think that is the imperative of our times, and to recognize the potential that we have to change the face of our country's economy, not just by mega companies bringing in money from all kinds of ways, but really through the work at institutions like yours, working with small employers, working with mid-sized employers, to bring more diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of race, diversity of background into our higher ed institutions, and making that transition to a more diverse talent base in our country.
Yeah, very related. It's a bit of a nuance, but so we have a tendency to talk about the millions of students or individuals really who have some college but never finished, and then and if you look at their demographic, they're making less money. They're sort of the left behind. We characterize them as a group in some ways that. Probably true. They are not the haves. They probably border more on the have-nots. But then I think we make a fundamentally really bad mistake, and we start to think about those individuals as maybe being deficient, even if we're not consciously doing it, but we do, right? Well, why didn't they finish? And what's wrong? Are they not motivated? Are they not very smart? These are really tough people who know a lot and do a lot, and they do much of the hidden work that we don't see or want to do. And so I say that because it's exciting. Remember when you got into teaching and you really wanted those engaged students that really wanted to learn and they wanted to ask, you wanted them to ask great questions? That's what adults will do if you make them feel comfortable and welcome, and you give them some basic skills so that they understand this strange academy that we've created. But once they're in, these are the most hardworking students and the most interesting students you'll have. These are strong, smart people. We just have to learn to see this broader diversity as something that we have to go meet, and they don't need to come to us. So that's what I want to see us all do. So I'm really excited that you're all here, and I look forward to coming and visiting my cool family many times and meeting and maybe spending more time with you, because I have been to some of the campuses and met with some of the folks, so would love to do more of that. Thank you.
So I think we have a few minutes for questions. Do we have questions from the audience?
They're hungry.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Gallman, and I work for a community college in North Carolina. And we historically have served a number of adult students. And I wanted to hear about your thoughts regarding the connectivity between the community college system and the university system in serving adults into the future?
Oh, can I start? Yes, I have a lot of, when I was in Maryland, we were the only institution that had articulation agreements, even at the program level, with all 16 community colleges. So I always say, community colleges do God's work. You're doing great. This is where most of our students are getting most education in the world, because so many students start there. But there's really important things that have to happen. You know, one is the faculty have to get to know each other, because, and advisors are important, but faculty really do the handoff. And then the students have a better pathway. You've got to create momentum. Whenever there's a moment when a student could get lost, they will get lost. So in that transition, you don't want them to get lost. You want to partner so that they feel like they're at your community college, but maybe already a member of that whatever 4-year they want to transfer to. So how can you actually have them, you know, feeling like they're already one of your students? The more you can actually think through what is it that the community college can do that helps the student on their pathway. So we're hearing some things now about, oh, those gen ed associate's degrees are bad. Boy, is the nuance different than that. Well, if you want a 4-year degree, you're going to have to take, you know, the 2 years of gen eds. But how can you maybe work together and think through, is there some sort of a work-based skill or certificate that can be part of that? But they're still getting an associate's degree in the, you know, arts and sciences the first 2 years, and it's great, and actually it's much more, it's less expensive for the student. But maybe make sure that there's some kind of a certificate in there that they can get a good first job so that they can afford to finish their education. So I think much more working together, much more of a handshake, and starting with the student and then designing those, that's what's really important. And again, I'm really passionate about that. We did all kinds of work with community colleges, and it's a fantastic route for a lot of students. In fact, we even did I shouldn't say we, I'm not there anymore, but I still love what we did, and they still do. We actually had a pathway where students could start a associate's degree while they were in high school. They could even, if they were, you know, really motivated, they could even start taking courses with UMUC, and then they could get we priced it so they could get a 4-year degree for less than $10,000 if they really took advantage of everything. So we were pretty excited about that.
I would like to add that there's a flipped way of thinking about this. So if you look at data from Burning Glass Technologies, if you don't know about Burning Glass, go look them up. They have amazing data on the degrees and the skills of the future. And so I encourage you to think about people who are on a track to a 4-year degree, picking up courses from the 2-year institutions that are more specifically technical. So if you're getting a 4-year degree in communications, for example, you might want to think of having your students pick up from the community college some technical skills in web-based marketing or design, things that your institution is not doesn't have the resources for, but your community college does. And how can you weave that into the degree? Because Burning Glass data says that the workforce of the future will need a 4-year degree plus those technical skills that are typically acquired by a community college. So I encourage you to think about the relationships that way, not just as a feeder, but as from 2 to 4, but a feeder from the 4-year institution to the 2-year, and how you can integrate those skills into that degree.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our panelists? Well, I think we've timed it well, and I think we're on track with our agenda. So thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and your expertise with us. We enjoyed our conversation this afternoon.
Thank you so much.